Alright, this is the third clip for the lecture on Hellman's play Children's Hour. This one right here. I ended the last clip by stating that Hellman never uses the word lesbian in her play, and that the play is not explicit. Now, it is about the lesbian relationship, but it is in some ways. Martha does say to Karen that she loves her, and that perhaps she loves her in the way that they talked about, because she's never loved a man. I mean, she's quite explicit in the last scene of the play. But what you need to consider as you interpret this play and as you talk about this play and its relationship to Lillian Hellman and the cultural context is what the play does say and how it says it in relation to both the relationship between Karen and Martha, but also this lie that Mary starts, this rumor that Mary starts and that she makes Rosalie complicit in, and that Mrs. Tilford believes so readily. And why does Miss Tilford believe it so readily? What is Miss Tilford's story? What is it she says, and how does she motivate it? What is her motivation? And this is again about her motivation. It's not that you have to believe it, but what is it she pieces together from what she has seen and she knows, and from what Mary says? What is it that makes sense to her? Because this is what the actors would need to think of to play this role. And the same is true for Rosalie. Why does Rosalie agree to be complicit in the lie? What is this? How does she make sense of her motivation to participate in the lie? And Mary, what is her motivation? If we look at how the play is set up to start answering these questions, Act 1 is quite long, and it sets up the situation, the Karen and Martha living together in the school situation, but it spends a lot of time on Mary and her classmates and introducing the audience to them and who they are, and giving us personalities in order to make their motivation clear. The Act 2 deals with, has two scenes in it. It's the only act with more than one scene, and the two scenes are Mary's lie when she talks to Mrs. Tilford, and the second scene is the confrontation when Kara and Martha storm into Mrs. Tilford's home saying, "What is it you're saying? What are the lies you're spreading? And why? Well, what's this all about?" And the confrontation both with Mrs. Tilford and then with Mary. And then it's the aftermath after the court case, because Act 2, Scene 2 ends with Martha and Karen saying that they are going to sue Mrs. Tilford for libel, but we never get to see it. We never get to see the court case. We never get to hear really what happens in court, except that Karen and Martha lose. That becomes clear in Act 3, and that they have lost their reputation in the whole town. That also becomes clear. And what I want to give you is a little bit of information about the cultural background for the play, and then I want you to think about what it is we actually find out in the play and how we find it out, and how is the relationship of Karen and Martha treated in the play, and what are the individual character motivations. This can include thinking about, for example, Martha in Act 3. Why does she kill herself? Because she kills herself. Why does she do it? And remember that we are not talking about why you think she does it in a general sense. We're not talking about it in a general sense in the play. We're talking about it in the David Ball sense. What is the thing, the action, the trigger that leads to her actually leaving the room, putting a gun to her head, and shooting herself? And so we're looking at triggers and heaps in relation to Mary. She has a last conversation with Karen, and what is it in that conversation that suddenly becomes clear to her? And how does it become clear to her? How can that last conversation be seen as explaining the actual reason for her killing herself? Alright, I was going to give you background. Homosexuality in the United States was illegal until 1962. Illegal in the sense that you could be arrested and put in jail. It was a felony, which is a very serious crime that can lead to both imprisonment and hard labor. It was under the sodomy laws. Sodomy has to do with anal penetration, but it also has to do with the indecency of homosexuality, and so women could also be arrested under this law. And because that law was still on the books until 1962, it was definitely still applicable to Lillian Hellman's portrayal of lesbianism in the play. In the theater and on the screen, there would continue to be prohibitions against showing homosexuality until the 1970s. But in actual fact, the homosexuality became increasingly visible, and you can see it in several of Cary Grant's films, for example. You can see it in Lillian Hellman's play. But as I noted before, there had been a play in 1926 by Basil Rathbone, and Basil Rathbone was an advocate for making homosexuality more visible. He didn't want homosexuals to have to hide who they were or to hide in society, and so he wrote a play called The Captive about a woman who leaves her husband for another woman, and both those lead actresses were arrested and the play was shut down. This was in September of 1926. But by 1934, Hellman's play could not only be performed, but it could be performed repeatedly and be a great success. But that still does not mean that it was allowed. They were still breaking the law, and so they were taking risks at this time. Wallace and Shepard are not very fond of different methods of criticism. They're very much for looking at the play itself and for seeing how the play works and how the play functions. And I like this in the sense that it's very good to be text-focused and to look for textual evidence for what you say about the play. And so in the exam, I will be looking for your textual evidence, for your arguments about not only this play, but all the plays in the course. And I will be asking questions that will force you to go back to your notes on the theory and to look at what Wallace and Shepard have had to say, what David Ball has had to say, in order to argue a case that uses the terminology that you're learning, that talks about character situation, that talks about the play text and how it determines things in the production, that talks about plot, and that talks about action and triggers and heaps, and that discusses this in a way that shows that you have read the material and thought about the material deeply during these past 5 weeks. I very much look forward to reading both your essay on that face, which will not be part of the exam. So that face is not going to be, there won't be any additional questions on that face. But you will have questions on the other plays for this course, and they will be specific questions that aim at you explaining theory and using it to talk about the plays. Alright, that's what I have for you for this, for the culture and interpretation of Children's Hour. One thing that you can think about when you read about Lillian Hellman is, why did these authors limit the period when they discussed Lillian Hellman to 1940 to 1960? Considering the perspective that they chose on her life, considering the perspective that they chose on her character and her morality, why did they exclude the 1930s? Alright, from a discussion of Lillian Hellman. Alright, that's it. Remember, if you have questions, to send them to me via email. The exam will be posted on Monday, and you will have 1 week to respond, so that's plenty of time. But I do think that the exam will take you several days, so do plan to make time for it. And if you haven't written the critical review or the essay assignment, do get on those and get that done as well. And remember, again, if you have questions, send me your questions and I will do my best to respond to them. Several students have done this, and I have received assignments from those students, so you can make it work. Alright, thank you. Talk to you all later. Bye.